This episode of This Agile Life has been brought to you by BrilliantAgile.com, providing Agile and Scrum training, consultancy, and personnel.
BrilliantAgile.com. Done right, it's brilliant.
Recorded on Tuesday, February 12th, 2013, in St. Louis, Missouri. This Agile Life, Episode 11, I'd Rather Be Coding. Welcome to This Agile Life, a podcast about what it's like to be agile in the real world. Joining me today are my co-hosts, Nate Mackey.
Hi.
Hey, Nate, how's it going?
It's going swimmingly.
That's great to hear. It's been a while since I've seen you.
Yes, I know. It has been a while, but we've been awfully busy, as I know you have been as well. But it's a good thing.
We're back in the same room doing This Agile Life again, even though Amos thought we were going to pod fade.
I know. Here we are.
When
Take
did
that,
that
Amos.
come from?
I know. We missed one. He thought we were done. So.
Oh, like Twitter side? Is that what this is?
That other guy over there is Jason Tice.
We were done like Jason Tice's Twitter account.
Yeah. Oh, I'm a sporadic Twitter person. I'm horrible. And my lesson learned, I'll share off the back, is that Twitter's not a good way to communicate supplemental notes out in a class. There's a better way. Just people like a little bit more structure around that, having a little bit more of an outline. So if you watch my Twitter feed, there were some things we were sharing from an Agile class we were doing, just some great references that we were talking about in the class. So there's some actually interesting information out there for a change.
The first time I ever met you, Jason, you were actually tweeting. I think that that was probably the last time as well, except for this most recent class-related thing.
I think you saw the we're going to crowdsource how to set up a portal environment, and we're going to write our instructions as we go by tweeting
That's
about them.
Exactly what it was. That's a great memory.
Yeah, it was fun. It was actually an interesting way to say that if you're doing system configuration, different ways to capture a repeatable process so that when, John, you have to configure the system next time, you might have some guidance.
Yeah. So the crickets from the other end of the room over there is where Amos King will be sitting when he joins us a little bit later after he gets done having dinner with his mommy.
So are we going over-under on what time he gets here?
We can do that. He said 7.
So a little shout-out that we got as we were interviewing people here at the company. There were people who had found the podcast, in preparation for their interview. And one comment that I got was that they thought when they started listening to it that there's no way they would understand what we were talking about because they hadn't really done Agile before, but that they actually could follow what we were doing, what we were saying. So I think that's what we were shooting for. So that's awesome.
Did that include when the architect guy showed up?
I don't know. He didn't mention that. So maybe stop listening before then.
That's great. Great to hear. Great to hear that other people are picking up on it and listening. It's always exciting to hear from our fans, quote unquote.
Yeah, right. So we definitely want to be called out if we start talking over people's heads or getting too deep in the weeds with Agile, because I think the whole point here is to try to make it accessible. Try to describe what it's really like.
And if any of our listeners out there have things that they'd like to hear us pontificate on and talk about and discuss here on This Agile Life, please go to our website at thisagilelife.com and let us know. So we're going to go ahead and pull a discussion topic from the Ready Queue, Jason. Our first discussion tonight is, what do you do with a non-performing member of an Agile team? This is really a very tough question and something that hopefully not too many people have had to deal with, but just as life happens, you run into situations where you have someone on the team that is maybe not following the whole team approach, maybe not living up to the standards or to the working agreements that the team has outlined. And so that's the question before us today, gentlemen, is what to do with a non-performing member of an Agile team.
And I think that a little bit more of the setup is, I think that this is an example, and I know I have a few instances where knowledge is power. And so as folks have learned more about what the whole team approach is, they've maybe learned some of the elements of the XP practices like pair programming, they've actually found ways to exploit them for personal gain. So, hi, I can show up to work and say I'm on this Agile team, and we take direction from this mysterious thing in the corner called the Kanban board, and there's an expectation of trust that if I need something to do, I should go to the board and I should pull something off the board that's related to what we're doing. But there's a huge assumption there that folks will be motivated to go to the board and do that, or to touch base and openly share at the stand-up meeting to say, hey, I finished my story yesterday. I need to pair with someone on a new story.
Yeah, that's true. And, as our teams have grown and matured, what we've seen sometimes is we went from a stand-up meeting where everyone kind of goes around in a circle and says, here's what I did yesterday and here's what I'm planning to do today, to more running the meeting from the board. So you say, here's how the board changed in the past day and who was responsible for each aspect of that. And then you talk about that. And that's, if you do have a person who's trying to fly under the radar, it's even easier for them to do that in that case because they're not being put on the spot. And pair programming can be a situation where someone can kind of, follow along minimally, but also check out and just let their partner, take over and do things for them. And we've certainly seen that before, and it is something that you have to watch out for.
Nate, I thought you were about to hit on one of the suggestions for how to maybe deal with this a little bit there when you were talking about talking to your board or talking to your work log or whatever it is that you're using. Because I think if you kind of combine those two things, if you combine the going around and everybody gets to talk with talking to the board and calling out what has gone on the past day and what you're planning to do the current day based on the board, then it becomes very obvious when it's that person's turn and they say, oh, pass, or I worked on this thing, but it's not on the board, or, it really...
And you put it on the board.
Then you put it on the board, right?
I did 3 of those this morning.
Or if the person says the same thing 5 or 6 days in a row, maybe even just 2 or 3 days in a row, that's kind of a red flag of what's taken so long.
Right, and I think it matters whether you're pairing or not. Because if you're pairing consistently, then if you go around the circle and have everyone talk, then invariably it's gonna get to be their turn, and it's gonna be like, yeah, what he said and what she said, and and so that's the kind of thing we kept running into that felt wrong. So we started talking more about what happened on the board. If people are working individually, absolutely, I think that would work. Every person should talk about how what they did impacted the board the previous day. I think that would make a lot of sense.
Well, that's a good distinction, though, the difference between single developers versus pair developers. And Jason, I think you alluded to that already, that people can work with a pair and sit back and kind of fly under the radar for a while, right? Is that one of the things that you've experienced or run into?
Totally. I mean, that's where it's kind of what is pairing, and if anything, there's within the market, when I say the market, people who buy Agile services, there's differing opinions about the effectiveness of pairing because of that. Because people have actually seen where pairing is perceived to be ineffective because they see someone who has checked out and like, well, what's that person doing? And I got one person who's using the keyboard doing all the work, and I got this other guy who's kind of over there. And so unfortunately, that's just from selling Agile, that's just something to be mindful of, that perception is out there with some stakeholders. The other thing that is relevant for this discussion that we didn't really include in the setup is there is, at least in Jason's opinion, a direct correlation between the effectiveness of this, or the challenges with resolving a non-performing team member and the size of the team. So if you're on a small team, self-managing or not, and you've got 5 to 6 people on the team, which many say is the optimal size for a self-managing team, it's a lot harder to fly under the radar, and it's also a lot easier to build consensus about what the common goal is. If you've got a large team where you've got 12, 15, 18 people all working from one board, and we have those, and those exist all over the place we know, then it's a lot easier to fly under the radar because there's less visibility to what each person's doing. So my question I throw out, like for you, John, and even you, Nate, is if you've got that large team, and it's because it's a large project, and so it needs a lot of people, what do you do? Do you divide and conquer and say we've got 3 teams? Do you split the board and have 3 lanes?
Let's start small.
Okay.
Let's start small, and then we'll grow into a bigger, when you're, whole team sort of thing. But if you're a practitioner and you're one of the guys that pairs, right? You're a developer, and you have somebody that you have to deal with, you have to pair with every once in a while who is not performing. What kind of things can we do to deal with that as a developer in the trenches doing the pairing work?
So you're saying person to person. So
person to person.
John and Jason pairing together.
We're peers.
And I'm an architect.
Both,
so
Nope. Take the architect.
No, my role
take
of
the
I'm
evil
gonna draw-
architect hat
I'm
off.
going to draw pictures of your code as you write it down.
Oh, stop it.
Perfect. That's what
Because I have to submit my UML diagrams to the CCB to approve the design before you can deploy.
Let's do a value stream map on your diagram.
Highly valuable. Okay, so anyway, I'm the non-performing guy. So I'm over here. I'm loafing.
Oh, good.
I'm
I'm
loafing,
glad it's
John.
you.
We're role play coaching clinic. So I'm loafing, John. I had a crazy night last night. You're trying to get something done. It's related. There's a drop coming up in a few days. What are you going to do to me?
I would pass you the keyboard probably and say, here, Jason, we just did this. What do you think? Can you refactor this? Can you improve it? What should we do next?
Okay, and I pass it right back and don't do anything.
Wow. I mean, you're not even going to give it the old college try, huh?
No, I'm bad. This is not the Jason you know. This is the Jason you're role playing with.
Yeah. I guess I would continue on and maybe wait a few minutes and then give it another volley, right? Wait, try, then say volley it back over to you. Okay, Jason, here. Or I would say, well, can you suggest maybe a test that we should write? Or
And I'm going to wait you out.
you're just going to totally sit back and
I was going to
turtle?
sit there. Yeah. What can you do? Just yourself.
I'll get up and go to the bathroom and
Never come back.
never come back. Yeah.
Well, okay, but okay. So talking about creating an incentivized climate to where there is a desire to contribute. Perhaps, and we've seen this in a lot of environments. You've got the senior developer, an experienced developer on the team who's really strong, and there is a correlation we've talked about in this past between strong developers. Maybe there's an ego involved. So guess what? He doesn't want to let me drive, and I'm content to sit over here and let him drive and read Facebook. Well, if you actually use the bathroom tactic, as I call it, there's a strategy to say you've created an opportunity for that person to step up and insert themselves. You've also created a visual display that all is not well in paradise, and you got up and stormed out to use the bathroom and left your buddy just sitting there, and it looks like he's on Facebook. So if I'm an observant team member because I'm working in an open space and I'm aware of what my other team members are doing, I might look over and just you might be able to recruit an ally to help you coach this person indirectly.
That's good advice.
And so I think a key thing to talk about, and again, there is an element of this whole topic that is very essential to how the team elects to use their teaming room, is to have awareness of what other folks are actually doing around you. So if you've got where you can tell that there's a stressful discussion going on and someone storms out, especially if you're the team leader, maybe you're just like another concerned team member, there is an opportunity to kind of have a touch point and to kind of say, hey, what's going on? Is everything okay over here? And do we need to change pairs? Is this working? Is this not working? And assuming that discussion would be supportive of the goal of drawing that person in.
Changing pairs is kind of like passing the problem off, isn't it?
What
would you do, Nate?
I would hope that in that situation that the person who is experiencing this person who refuses to do anything would engage them in a conversation about what's going on. Did you have a rough night? Are you confused about what you're doing? Can I explain, more about it? Am I leaving you behind? I would hope rather than just saying, oh, well, I guess I'll just keep coding, that they would take the initiative to talk to them about it. I know not everybody will do that, but I think that's what it's going to take. If there is a team lead or a tech lead, and they really just don't want to engage them or they don't feel comfortable for whatever reason, maybe they don't know them very well or whatever it is, I would hope that they would bring this to the attention of the tech lead or the team lead, who would then take the opportunity to further observe or maybe pair with them and just kind of see how it goes and, try to draw them out and figure out what's going on. So ultimately, to me, it's addressing them directly with what's going on and why it seems to be a problem. It's got to be done.
So if we're going to escalate, the only tactical guidance I would provide based upon behavior theory is don't shoot transparency in the foot. So if you're going to go talk to the team lead, to take the person with you, or ideally if you're all there, guess what? It can just happen right there in the working area. But the second that you, as a member of the team, or in this case, Mr. John, goes to Nate, the team lead, and says, "Oh my goodness, you will not believe what Jason's up to. He's over on Facebook just going to town and doesn't care anything about what we're doing." Then I'm not going to trust you. And you are going to have to spend a lot of time to regain my trust. And on top of that, then if Nate comes and confronts me outside of my knowledge, then I'm not going to trust you either.
Right. Well, that's why I'm thinking it. I absolutely, the number one best thing is to talk to them about it right there and try to pull them out. And it would only be in a situation for some reason you feel like there's some discomfort or that you're an introvert or whatever, you don't feel comfortable engaging someone that way. Rather than just letting it go, talk to the team lead, who I hope would be tactful, and rather than, call them out or immediately turn and start saying what's going on, would observe what's going on and try, like I said, maybe try to engage them separately in a way to try to figure out what's happening.
Well, keep in mind the context here. John said was small. So if you're a small team and you've got 5, let's say 4 to 6 people all working in a small space.
Yep.
I mean, this could almost be a, hey guys, let's time out. Let's take 5 minutes. Let's figure this out. We're all, and if you're the leader, even if you're a team member, hey, we're all in this together. So,
that's awfully confrontational. I think it takes a lot of guts to do that, to pull the, what do they call it, the stop switch on the production line?
The general quarters
Stop
alarm is a term we love to use where I work.
What's that?
Pull the general quarters alarm.
There's a Kanban term for it, though, right?
Stop the line.
Yeah, stop the line.
Yeah, well, and yeah, right. I mean, you say that's awfully confrontational, and again, it depends on how able the team is to be honest about, individual issues as opposed to team issues. Because, you could also have a retrospective, and you could bring these things up in a retrospective, and a lot of teams, most teams that I've seen aren't comfortable with just saying, yeah, well, the topic I'd like to talk about is Jason is really slacking. So let's talk about that. But
that's tough.
Which breaks all the rules of the retrospective.
Right.
So.
But you can maybe find ways to say, I feel like not all of our team members are engaged. Is there, maybe there's an activity that you could do to try to draw out what kind of issues are people seeing, or what's bringing them down, or what's causing them to have a bad attitude, that you could do in more of a private, anonymous way. That would maybe kind of draw out what's going on.
So the only thing the leadership and behavior theories are actually, well, we're from St. Louis, so right down the road from here, the psychological associates guys, who are the mindset behind leadership through people skills, they would teach us that for every instant we wait, and so we elect to know there's a problem, and people who are informed elect to say, well, I'll see if it goes away. Well, they've proven it will never go away, and it will only get worse. So there is a strategy, and that's where if we're going to talk about the general quarters alarm, to say, well, when does it make sense to do that? Or is that just something where for a small team, that we just do it right there and we never get behind the curve, where we've got people who are starting to build up those emotional anxieties that then ultimately will fester into something that will probably have a more significant impact on the team.
Well, I agree with that. I thought that was the whole point of having retrospectives, is that you have them often enough
that you don't let things build up.
Right. And that they're a place where those issues can be talked about that's comfortable and doesn't feel awkward. It doesn't feel like I'm bringing attention to this issue right now. I'm going to stop everybody in what they're doing and bring attention to this issue. And some teams like to work that way. I mean, some teams are totally like, if there's a problem, let's just stop right now and deal with it. And I agree that is the best time. If you encounter a problem, just to stop right there and deal with it. But it's just really what a team is comfortable doing. And if you can't just say, okay, this is how we're going to handle problems. We're going to just stop. We're going to have everybody turn around and stop no matter what the problem is.
Yeah, because then everyone's going to be pulling the alarm, and you're never going to get
Or
done.
no one will. Or no, it will never happen. And I've seen that happen too, where you say, we're not going to have retrospectives because we're just going to have everybody bring up the problem when it happens, and then no one ever brings it up because the example has not been set, or people don't feel a comfort level with the team, or whatever it is.
Well, there's also perception that you're taking time away from the value added work of the team, which is one of the key elements of having a time boxed, fixed retrospective. Go over here and have a retrospective and stop working.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you're not constantly breaking the flow of the team.
Yeah.
But it seems like a psychologist would suggest some sort of path of escalation through, or maybe an HR person would say, person-to-person conversation first, then person to person plus manager, then maybe I don't know beyond that.
Okay, so let's have the other elephant in the room is micromanagement. So we've got an Agile team. We've got some great people on the Agile team. We've got John, we've got Nate, we've got our audio guy Lee over there, we've got Amos when we show up. They're the great members of the team. They are all on board with this whole team approach. They work off that common board. And then unfortunately we still have non-performant Jason over here. So the team can't deal me, and Nate, the tech lead, has decided to escalate my lack of performance through human resources.
So now we're escalating it up to the next level of
let's just say we did that.
Dealing with it are we dealing with it still at the team level, or
I said Nate has elected to.
I see.
We've had 4 retros, and every time there's a retro, all we do is talk about how all I want to do is go on Facebook. So now Nate has decided to, again, Nate's concerned about the goal. We want to stay on track. Our customer thinks we have 5 developers working, and unfortunately my commitment to Facebook means that we only have 4. So would we want to escalate, or what do we do? So, because John, what I'm saying is your tactics that we kind of started with, having a discussion one-on-one, and even then having a team discussion, me as the individual here, I can still work around that and continue about my ways. It might be miserable for me, it might be miserable for you, but I can keep doing that.
Right. So you're the immovable stone.
As the non-performant person, I'm forcing you to escalate it.
Yeah, you forced us. We have no other option.
So what are you going to do?
Yeah,
and there's silence. So we're going to escalate.
No, that's tough. It's tough. So you go to the.
This is the dirty little secret no one wants to talk about.
Dr. Lee says we fire you, and and I'm okay with that.
Oh, wonderful!
But there's that's an option, right? But we don't have that power.
Well, I think there's a fairness factor to say, number one, do I understand the problem that I'm causing? And that's I know a book that myself, Nate, a few of us work for Asynchrony that our management's talked about. Is there's the book Crucial Conversations, which really talks about how to sit down and have a very serious, tactful conversation about a difficult topic within a lot of different contexts. This, I think, is one of them, to say that, Jason, you're just not. There are some issues here that you may not think they're problems, but the team thinks they're problems, and really, I think there is a certain level of respect to keep things at the team level. So it's not John versus Jason, and or Nate versus Jason, or Nate and John versus Jason. It's the whole team.
Right.
And from that, to try to incentivize the behavior to say, we need you to support the goal. A thing I might say, and I've actually seen this happen before, is someone said, well, I didn't know what the goal was. So what is this team trying to do? And then, okay, I understand how my addiction to Facebook is.
That's a common thing that happens. I didn't understand what the expectations are. So I've been involved with this from a big enterprise. Jason's favorite catchphrase.
John, you're in the big enterprise now?
I've been in
really?
I've experienced this in the big enterprise.
Big enterprise, okay.
So a person is underperforming, you try and address it at the team level, it gets bumped up to management and ultimately HR. And then HR usually has a very specific set of CYA steps with making sure the person is informed about what the expectations for their job are, so that you crystallize, hey, we're expecting you to develop and not be on Facebook, Jason. So that expectation is clearly outlined with you. And then there's a plan put in place to evaluate your performance against these newly realized expectations with you on a regular basis. And you either get better, you stay the same, you get worse. And if you stay the same or get worse, you're ultimately ejected from the company.
See, the one thing I suggest on that, and I think that is, again, if I'm the problem child here, and this is the real life case, and we all know this one exists, the way to make that, again, a little bit more effective in the Agile concept is to keep that keep HR out of the team.
I'm for that.
So hence, there is an HR issue going on. There's an escalation going on for which the person has been provided some expectations they need to make. And if I'm committed to the goal and I'm committed to the process, I'm going to hopefully follow through on that. What that means is then I just come in and I support the rest of the team process. But what we haven't done is saying that as John or Nate is the team lead, no, Jason, that is your story on the Kanban board. It is your responsibility to get that one done. John can't help you. Lee can't help you. I want you to do it. That's the specific anti-pattern that, at least from personal experience, I would not recommend. Mm-hmm. And I think out of respect for the whole team approach, everyone's at a different level in terms of their aptitudes and their knowledge, skills, and ability for what they bring to work. And when they form a team, it really allows us to say the team needs to work, and the people on that team may have issues they need to resolve, be it professional, performance, personal, and the team can be respectful of that, knowing that is within the constructs of what the team needs to do.
Well, I think the bottom line is that if that happens, you need to get down to the root cause of why it's happening somehow, whether that's one-on-one or team-on-one or lead-on-one or whatever it is. Ultimately, you need to get down, try to discover the root cause for why someone's behaving the way that they are, whether it's a misunderstanding or whether it's, personal issues or whatever it is, and then deal with that root cause. And if ultimately the root cause is I'm not a good fit for this environment, then that there's another course of action to take. But you would hope that in most cases, if the person was hired, there's potential there. There's something there that you think is worth keeping around, and that it's worth trying to figure out what's going on.
So we started our discussion talking about the one-team approach. So a couple of different variations, because we could scale, talk about the larger team and how this breaks down. Or the other one that is kind of relevant, and again, if we're in a large enterprise, as John said, and we're doing small agile dev teams, there's an assumption that we have multiple teams. So, okay, we have the person, we've attempted to mitigate the scenario, and they're on one team, and ultimately we get to a non-positive result. So, well, then they might wash up someplace else, or they might be reassigned. So, what is the role of the organization to help to facilitate that transfer? So, perhaps there's a better outcome in the next environment or on the next team.
Far too often, I think what we see is people getting bounced around.
Or is there? Let me ask you: is there a role the organization should play?
I definitely think the organization should play a role in that, because the organization shouldn't make things worse by bouncing the person around. Moving the person to another team could be something that resolves the problem. But like Nate said, Nate made a very salient point. You have to get to the root cause. If you don't understand what the root cause is, and you just move the person to another team, all you're doing is moving the problem. And you're not solving anything, because you haven't figured out why is this person underperforming, what's causing the underperformance. You're just saying, well, rather than try and get to the root cause and deal with it, I'm going to pass the person off to somebody else and hope and pray that it gets better, which it won't. And so the person will bounce around and be unhappy and make other people unhappy on top of it, which is worse than leaving the person where they are and dealing with it and isolating the unhappiness.
Absolutely.
So I guess to me, I'd say there's some level of personal accountability in that, to realize that perhaps you are misaligned. So it takes a...
The resource is misaligned, or the person is misaligned?
The person is
that what you're saying?
So this endeavor of I'm going to work on a small self-managing agile team, doing pair programming, taking direction from the mysterious thing called the Kanban board, maybe isn't what's cut out for you.
Well, again, it all goes back to what Nate said, getting to the root cause. You have to get to that root cause. You have to understand what the problem is before you try and solve it.
Yeah.
Well, and so hopefully, to bring this back around to Agile, hopefully what Agile is doing is creating an environment where, A, that kind of issue is more quickly identified. I've seen too many non-Agile teams where someone can float along under the radar for a long time before anyone discovers it. And B, creates a whole team concept where everyone's working together, and if someone is called out for their behavior, that it's in the sense of we want the team to work better and not just I don't like you. So hopefully Agile at least creates an environment where it's a little easier to deal with that kind of issue, and you can deal with it more quickly.
So, John, is there any final thoughts then on when we go from the small team to the little bit bigger team? So we go from 4 to 6 up to, if we've got the 12 or the 15-person team, and how that may or may not impact such a scenario?
I don't think that changes the scenario. I think that it maybe gives, the bigger the team is, the easier it is to hide, with the exception of when you have pairs. Mm-hmm. It's very, very hard to hide when you're pairing. One of the things that I wrote in an article not too long ago was that when you're pair programming, all of your stuff is right there exposed in front of everybody. If you have shortcomings with the IDE, your pair is going to know about it. If you have shortcomings with the language, or the domain. Your pairs are going to know about it. There's nowhere to hide. It's all right out there in front of everybody for everyone to see. So I think pair programming is beneficial in that perspective because it forces the team to deal with those issues.
I would say the only exception to that is the one that Jason referred to earlier, where you have the hotshot rock star programmer.
I don't need to pair with anyone.
No, that's not what I meant, actually. Is the one who does not mind never giving up the keyboard.
Yeah.
And so invariably, the person who wants to float under the radar will always hook up with the person who doesn't want to give up the keyboard. And they'll look like they're doing all this stuff together when actually it's just really one person and a spectator. So it's incumbent on those great developers on the team to not let that happen, to not succumb to the temptation to just always race along on their own time as if they're alone, just because the person next to them is letting them do it.
So, John, let's go back to problem child here. So you're the coach, and so and we've brought in the team reformer expert Nate here, who's told us all about the value and benefits of pair programming. And he's read your piece about 7 effective habits of pair programming, or whatever the title is. And so he's advised me, as the person who has some issues here, of how everything's exposed when I'm pairing with you. How do you coach me to solicit my trust that I'm willing to sit down with someone at the keyboard when maybe I don't know the ID? Maybe the ID the team picked is the only one that I really don't get. And so I'm not really comfortable, and I don't want to expose myself because I don't want that to be held against me.
I think it's difficult to sit down there without any experience and get thrown into a pairing environment. So I think that there is definitely coaching that has to happen with that person to say, we understand you're coming in with some shortcomings. The whole team understands that, and the team is going to work with you, and we're all going to work with you to help you get up to speed on those things. Now, this presupposes that person has the desire to want to get better at those things, right? If you're truly a problem child and you don't care about getting better, that's a completely different set of issues altogether, which I think is exactly what we're talking about. But if you're saying that the person has a desire to get better, what you have to come to grips with is, as that person is, somebody's going to find out that I'm not really great at something. And you have to realize that there's always somebody in the world that knows more karate than you. You're always going to have to deal with that situation, and that this is just one of many of those situations where you're going to have an opportunity, and you can look at it as an opportunity. You have an opportunity to learn from someone, pick up something new. And so you sell it as it's a learning opportunity. It's not going to be that you're going to be ridiculed or made fun of because you don't know things. This is an opportunity for you to learn and become better.
So Amos got here. Hi, Amos. We're done. Bye.
All right, I made it.
Okay,
a little late apparently.
But the
just having dinner with my mom because I'm a nice boy.
Oh, that's so good. So the almost maybe as a closure. I don't know if we want to change topics and start something new with Amos here.
Sure.
Nate thinks this topic is slow. The one that I'll draw out there, and a great strategy that I've used to help to facilitate a culture of continuous improvement is doing what I call what's your appetite for improvement. I'm going to talk this one through real quick. And actually, we just had pizza here, so if you grab some paper, get some paper plates, real life. So like, go find the really inexpensive, typical 8-inch paper plates, and you can do this in a team session or retro, whatever. Give everyone on the team, draw a line across the middle of the plate. On the top half of the plate, so you got to divide it in half. On one side of it, have members of the team declare things that they think they're really strong in. So this is kind of like a dynamic knowledge, skills, and ability assessment. And have people literally kind of make a depiction on the plate of what those are. They can list 100. They can maybe list the top 3. They can kind of choose what they want. On the other half of the plate, make sure there's some way that it's denoted. Show the things where people really think they would like to improve. And then throw that all up on the wall. And some people actually want to put names on it so people can provide mentoring. Some people want to do it anonymously, so it's more of a team baseline. But from that, the team then has a collective understanding of where people have strengths and where maybe other people have weaknesses, and the team can self-mitigate these types of situations. What I've seen in a lot of scenarios is that people don't know that they're on, they might not know the ID that the team's using, but they've got someone like John over here who at night, he's an open source contributor helping to improve that ID, and he's a resident expert on it, and he could help them understand it better. And unless they happen to identify that, that entire learning opportunity goes underutilized going forward.
Sounds like a great retrospective game to use to identify, what do you call it, appetite for improvement?
Sure, appetite for improvement.
Excellent.
So, and it goes up again. It looks funny, too, because people will come in. You can bring your customers in and, hey, look, we put paper plates all over the wall, and people think you're back in kindergarten.
Exactly. That's what all Agile workspaces look like, though, is kindergarten again. Speaking of kindergarten again, Amos, welcome to the podcast tonight.
How's it going tonight, John?
Great. How are you?
Oh, pretty good.
Looks like you got some
busy
sort of a
running around.
Nexus sort of device there.
Kindle Fire HD.
Kindle Fire. All right.
I kind of like it as a. It's a great tablet. I still like my regular Kindle for reading books, though. Nothing kind of beats that like paper white screen.
Agreed. So we're pulling another discussion topic from our Ready Queue tonight, and the next topic is, why do Agile teams hate measurements?
Again? Didn't we talk about this once?
No, we did not. It's just been in the
Amos
ready
would
queue
have
for a
loved
long
the last
time.
topic.
Maybe we forgot to measure it.
How do you know we forgot to measure it?
Can we measure how
Amos,
many
you
times
know-
we forget something?
So,
Do Agile teams hate measurements?
well, I don't think they hate measurements, honestly. They hate measuring. And I think it's I've been wanting to write this kind of series of blog posts for a long time, and I need to just do it, about I'd rather be coding, and then all the different things that you don't do because you'd rather be coding. And I think that's what it comes down to, is that the developers would rather just be writing code, and anything else that they have to do is secondary.
Can we write code to collect metrics?
Well, absolutely.
That could make it more fun.
That is absolutely true, but that's not. I don't know why people don't think of that. In fact, that's one of my main consternations about this whole thing, is why would a group of people who are logically and scientifically minded in general not want to know more about what they're doing on an analytical sense? Why wouldn't they want to know these things, and why wouldn't they go and try to find ways to automate them, to have them just happen in the background while they do their work? And yet there are so few teams that actually do that. And that's really my question. I don't understand why teams don't want to do that. Why do they not want to know more about themselves?
Are they afraid of the introspection that's involved with that?
It's possible.
I think a lot of it is knowing that you're collecting a metric that's useful. Most programmers that I know get really upset when they realize that they've been doing something that ends up being fruitless. And so many of the metrics that people suggest to collect seem pretty fruitless. Like, what do I get out of this? So we tracked cycle time for a while, and it might have made a little improvement for us, but most of the time the cycle time just goes up and down, and it's not super consistent all the time. And we've tried making little changes to get more consistent. So maybe that's just the nature of the beast. We don't know how. Maybe there's something else to measure. And I think that's a lot of it, is just not knowing what metric is useful, what brings time, especially whenever you're doing it by hand. And then the automating part is, when do I do that? Do I do it when I'm sitting at home and as just an extra thing? It's hard to justify to bill to a customer, hey, we did a metrics tool for you, for this team. Hopefully that you don't mind we spent 8 hours on it, so that we didn't have to think about entering this every time we check in a story or something like that, something that automates it.
Well,
Right.
there is an enterprise viewpoint here to say that there is, if there's a desire,
You put the big enterprise hat
the
on.
big enterprises here. If there is a desire to have a standard set of metrics to look at health across an organization, and actually on a prior episode we talked about agile maturity, and pretty much decided that there's some relevance to that, but it's still in a somewhat evolutionary state. But if there is the desire to have a common metric across an organization, that perhaps the organization make an investment to provide a standard mechanism for the teams to generate that metric, and then it's a value add that the enterprise provides, and isn't necessarily a cost that's passed on in an ad hoc fashion to every single team to then provide those metrics.
But we've also talked before about how part of Agile is there is no one process that fits every single team. And so my my objection has always been, I don't know that there's one metric that fits every single team, or if you decide there is one metric, if you truly can compare those teams across, so for example, Amos brought up cycle time, and cycle time seems like a great candidate for an enterprise-wide metric, because you can pretty much, especially if all your teams are using Kanban, you can find a way to say how long did it take from when you started to when you finish. But isn't the temptation just going to be too strong to then start comparing teams to each other, that this team's cycle time is lower than this other team's cycle time, and their cues and what they have to do to get through them could be completely different, and it would be so easy to game that if you felt like you were being compared.
No. You're right. And what Nate's talking about is management by metrics gone wrong
Right.
by a bunch of evil. The PMI folks showed up, so the project management guys, evil PMI folks have shown up.
But it's natural when you see two numbers that are called the same thing that you want to understand why they're different.
So tell me, you've cut off the evil enterprise architect here, because what the evil enterprise architect was going to inform you about is the best practice, of which we know there aren't really any, but we'll pretend there are, is that we shouldn't be analyzing the metrics, we should be analyzing the trends.
Right.
Consistency.
Yeah, consistency. So,
holy crap, I just agreed with the devil.
But keep in mind that many people, and again, everyone in this room gets this, but this is where management by metrics goes awfully wrong, because people they want to jump to conclusions. And actually, like we talked about at our Work in Progress Society meeting last night, people get obsessed with understanding the practice, meaning that we're going to track cycle time, and they don't fully understand the principles behind why we track cycle time and how cycle time should actually be applied.
And then, we talked about cycle time, but a lot of people want to measure different things. And I'm sure that all of us have been in an argument with a group of pretty bright developers and seen how long and grueling sometimes that can be. And now you get into an area where they even know maybe less about, but are more opinionated about. And any time that I've been on teams, it's really hard to come up with what metrics we are going to track. And if we decide that we're going to track everything that everybody wants, we're going to spend 90% of our time just writing down what we're tracking.
Yeah, but see, that's where from again, big enterprise over here, there's an economy of scale to make some investment in saying this is we have some tools available that maybe we've even pre-configured to track some metrics that management believes are useful. And if you simply use the tools, and maybe we even have a variety of tools, so you can pick what you want from the menu, the metrics would be reported for you. And there's the need to have trust to say that we're not going to use metrics to do things they were never intended to do, like John's cycle time is less than Amos's cycle time because John's stories are scoped to be half-day stories. Amos's stories are scoped to be 2-day stories. So John's cycle time will always be less. So
right. So I agree that there's a good way to do it. I'm just saying that that it's so easy for it to go wrong that you have to be careful, and you have to make sure that everyone understands what the point is, and that you are looking at trends, and that you're not comparing one team to another just because the statistics are the same. And I also agree that having an enterprise tool where everybody can collect it the same way makes it easier to do. However, all that, I still say that different teams have different needs, and no tool is perfect for every team.
Of course.
And so that's also another consideration, is that as easy as it would be is to say we're going to buy product X for the whole enterprise because product X gives us this metric and then forces everyone to use that tool, doesn't necessarily make things great for everyone, because they may be now struggling with a tool that's actually causing them to have worse productivity just so that this metric can be gathered.
And you collect different metrics for different reasons. So the same metrics aren't necessarily good for teams. Metrics are there to drive behavior. And so if you want a specific behavior out of a group that you're not seeing, you can use metrics in order to drive that behavior based on what you're collecting.
I'm not sure the original intention of metrics is to always drive behavior. Yeah. But I do agree that oftentimes that it's a side effect of the metrics.
Yeah. I've talked about before, collecting the number of stories. Don't worry about XP or your estimates. How many stories did you get through this week? That drives behavior to write smaller stories that don't take as long, and to not be afraid to say, hey, we need to write a new story. because we realize that there's more to this than what's there, and it causes people to break those things up. But that is a side effect of that metric. Like, that's not anything that I've seen on teams where we don't collect that type of metric.
Okay, so go ahead.
let me try, because I think Nate's really trying to peg me into the evil C2 governance circle over here.
No, I'm trying to take this a different direction. But
Well, okay. Well, what about the? So what I want to think about what they call case management. So case management is a different type of governance in the sense that there are things that we need to do that the enterprise or the organization has defined, but the enterprise hasn't necessarily told us how to do them. So it's almost like a mother may I approach. So the enterprise says we shall track a collection of metrics, which perhaps maybe even the team can choose some metrics from a list, and then the team has to provide an explanation for how they're going to satisfy them. The enterprise can then accept or reject that based upon if it meets the requirements. And so no team has been pegged into a specific metric and or how to track it and or what their workflow needs to be, but the team needs to demonstrate that they can align to a requested expectation of the organization.
Yeah, right. I understand that, and I don't disagree that there's value there. And I think that, if you look at David Anderson's Kanban book, there's he promotes the idea of an ops review, which I've thought about several times for a place like Asynchrony, is having the leaders from across the company come together and share their metrics for their team, and hopefully those metrics have some similarities so that everybody can kind of understand. They don't need a lot of explanation about what the metric is about, and they can share it across the board so that, number one, everyone's held accountable to actually gather these metrics and examine them. And number two, they can get assistance from other places to see what's going on. If teams say, oh, it looks like you're struggling, can we help? What's going on? And start asking questions. And so I think there's value there, and I think it can be done right. It's just, I still think it's tricky. And I don't want the metrics to be there because a big enterprise forced these teams to do it, right? That's not the idea. I want the teams to want to do it, and that's really what bothers me, is it seems like they would. And I think Amos makes a great point that maybe they get frustrated and they feel like, well, I don't know what to measure. I have no idea what to measure. There's so many things I can measure, and I don't want to waste my time on something that is not going to do me any good, so I'm just not going to do it. I think that's probably a very valid point. But I wonder if what this comes down to is there's not the real motivation to do it. It's more that it would be interesting to do it, but I don't want to spend time. I've got other things I could do. But the motivation to measure is not really there. And it feels like that what's going to motivate the teams to measure is to have a true sense of Kaizen in the company, this idea of continuous improvement that everyone in the company is responsible for. So we were at our Limited Whip Society meeting yesterday, and Matt Phillip, who was leading the meetings, pointed out, that each person, that in a Kaizen organization, each person thinks to themselves, my job is to improve my job. That is their job, is to make their job better. And they can't do that if they don't have metrics. You can't really improve if you don't have benchmarks and ways to know that you're getting better. So if you can infuse that idea of continuous improvement all the way down, like a place like Toyota has been able to do, then people are going to want metrics. They're going to be hungry for them, and they're going to be hungry for the right ones so that they can know really how to get better.
And I think that's what you need, though, is find the right ones. If you can find the right ones, if we can make suggestions to people and show them that it's worked, they're more likely to do it. And I think part of that is we've talked about trends. You have to have a consistency of metrics. If I go out and shoot a bow and arrow into a target and I shoot it 15 times and all of the arrows are 10 inches away from each other, they're not grouped together at all, it's hard for me to tell how to get better, right? So if these metrics are fluctuating too much, then I'm going to say they're useless and I'm going to throw them out. So we got to find what metrics can we think of that are consistent enough that we can draw more conclusions from them in order to make ourselves better. And is there anything that you guys have run into that can allow teams to do that?
Well, I think there's a big knowledge gap too. Hence, there's some folks who would like to do metrics and they maybe don't know how, or they don't know what metrics are relevant for the specific challenges they may be experiencing. And that's where I think from even talking about like an ops review concept, there's an opportunity to bring people together to share that type of information to say, hey, we've got this problem. These are the metrics we're using. And then John's like, I got that problem too. Maybe those metrics are relevant for me.
So I want to build on all of these things because I think what Nate said is very important, the internal desire to want to get better. And then what you just said, Jason, was not having the knowledge or the ability to understand how to get a metric to determine that. And then what you said, Amos, about everybody needing to have metrics that are important to them, right? So you and I may be on the same team, Amos, but we don't need the same metrics because you're good at something, I'm good at something else. But it's almost personalizing the metrics and establishing for each individual what they're going to get better in. So you have to start with having the conversation about where are you today, what do you need to get better at, and then using metrics to help that person get better at those things.
And that's another thing, like Jason mentioned and you just mentioned, was that what metrics do I need to collect to solve my current problem? Well, that's my current problem, but metrics are often sold to developers as you can figure out what your problems are by looking at the metrics, not help this metric find where your problem is in the smaller area, because there are certain metrics that will focus in certain areas. You have to know where those weaknesses are, where metrics are often sold to developers as a magic bean, right? It's going to take you and you're going to get so much better because of that. I think it is often.
I think that's how developers spin it to say that metrics suck. Ooh, it's a magic bean and it's going to fix all the problems.
I like metrics, and I think that it's been sold to me that way from a lot of people. Like, hey, if you just collect these metrics, they'll just show you what's wrong.
Or is it
you don't even have to do much. You'll just see it on this chart, and you'll know exactly how you need to change your team in order to get better.
I hope I have never said that, because
I'm not saying you
right.
have,
all I've
but
ever said is
that
you can't know that you're getting better unless you have metrics.
Right.
And so
otherwise it's just a fuzzy feeling in your belly.
Right.
Well, yeah, it's a fuzzy, you can't prove that you're getting better.
Right. And you might be. Fuzzy feelings can go a long way, but that doesn't mean that.
So, Nate, you mentioned you have a different direction, because I have a radically different direction on this question.
I want to say one other thing.
Okay.
So our friend Oliver Farini asked me one time, when's the last responsible moment to start capturing metrics? And I never got to answer his question because I got derailed by something else. But the answer to that question is the sooner the better. Even if you don't use the data, you should immediately start gathering the data and at least capturing it. If you're not reporting on it, or you're not turning it into pretty graphs or charts or showing people it, you have to capture the data, because if you don't have the data, you can't do anything. So step one is just get that data to start being captured.
Now what data? Let's talk about that. Because I think every one of us around this table have ideas about what metrics worked for us in the past. So,
and I have a metric that I was going to throw out that is something
5.
that will never, I don't think, would be on anyone. Okay, so what are your 5?
And I usually can't get most teams to do all of them. I might be able to get them to do one. Okay. Number of stories per iteration, like how many completed stories, not how much you estimated, not how like time period, but number of stories. Number of new defects found in an iteration. So over time, you can tell, am I increasing in new defects or decreasing? Is my code quality getting better or worse? New features that get added to a backlog. So if during the iteration something gets moved to the backlog or added to the backlog, how often does that happen?
Does that include pulling a story back to the backlog?
Anytime anything goes to the backlog.
Okay.
How often does that happen? New stories that are created during an iteration, like if I'm working on a story and realize I need to split it and make a new story, how often does that happen? Because that tells me a little bit about my planning and did I have enough upfront knowledge? How much am I learning during, and how much do I know ahead of time? And then number of defects that I've resolved in an iteration. So not completed stories, but completed bugs, like bug fixes.
Decrement the bug count. Okay.
If you use a tool, if you use an electronic tool, I think the majority of that can easily be captured by the tool. Even if you use a manual board, I think it's easy to
count cards,
dot count it or whatever, as people are working.
Right. That's what I would say to your original comment, is that if you're using a manual board, then it's hard to capture all of those metrics that Amos just mentioned, and it's going to be very time consuming to capture every possible metric that you might want. And so your comment about capture it as soon as possible, I think is valid, but if you don't have a tool that's doing it for you, you're going to spend a lot of time gathering data that you may never use, and people are going to get discouraged and quit doing it.
Yeah. In the case where it takes manual effort from somebody to track the data, it's harder to get them to do that.
Right.
But the point that I'm making is that you can't do something with data you don't have.
Right, I agree.
Yeah.
Which is part of why I like the ops review idea, because it forces day one for you to start capturing something. You've got to capture enough data to be able to go in front of your peers at the ops review and have something to say. And so you can't wait until there's a problem and then start collecting data. You have to do it day one. And so at least you've got something. You may not have everything you might ultimately need, but hopefully if you start ingraining this idea that everybody's got to report some data, then that's what's going to motivate people to start automating and start finding easier ways to get the data so that it's not so much work manually.
That's a good point.
And that's another way to motivate. It's just
and you have to make them feel that they have the opportunity to spend that time to automate it.
Right. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah,
Which
for sure.
is, a lot of people, they don't feel like that is important to the customer, so it's not important.
Right, and I would hope that the customer liaison, project manager, whoever would fight for the team to do that, as long as they're not abusing it. Would fight for them to say this is worthwhile activity that they're doing. You may it may hurt this iteration, but it's going to help the entire release or your ongoing.
And if it's hard for them to collect a metric by hand, they won't.
That's right.
They'll
exactly
fake it
right.
At the end of the week. They'll be like, "Oh, I think I did 6 stories."
Exactly.
So Amos, as a metrics guy, I loved the 5 hardcore, 100% quantitative metrics.
I knew you'd like that.
Yeah, hardcore. And now I want to throw a under wrench because there's the one other metrics that I think is important for an Agile team that we never talk about is measuring and measuring and looking at the trend of our customer satisfaction over time.
That's a tough one.
Is that relevant, or am I fluffy over here?
I mean,
or
I
is
think
that not the role of the team?
I think it's completely relevant. I would love to find an easy way of doing that, and I've been tempted so many times to send out surveys after every demo and just simple
like,
surveys.
what did you
see.
think?
Right.
Thumbs up, thumbs down, and knowing that then from the trend, ooh, look, we're trending down, and maybe there's a course correction before we...
Right. It's just, the problem is that it takes so long to get a significant sample size, and since those feelings are so subjective, it's hard to totally rely on it. That's what stopped me from doing it. Is I would want to almost have a fairly substantial survey that I'm giving them, and not just a simple up down, so I can kind of track what's really going on. But you want something simple so that they'll actually do it. And
I don't know. I think that a simple up down would be interesting. Just in like maybe how do you feel compared to last? How do you think the customer feels compared to last week? Up or down, and then you can overall if you look at the whole
we're talking
team,
about asking the customer.
I'm saying ask good, but I love what you're saying.
Okay, ask the customer, and also ask the developers how they feel about their day-to-day job.
They're doing for the team,
right?
Like whether not just doing for the team. Are they happier or sadder than they were last week?
I would love to
look
see
at overall trend of how the team goes up and down.
Or the other thing that I've done I've done some research on this, where there's some very interesting trends that pop up. So you have that infamous iteration where things don't go according to plan. The customer says, hey, you need to take those 3 stories that we talked about during the planning meeting, rip them out of the backlog, and put these 3 other stories in. Well, your metrics go haywire, or you have an expedite story, something has to go through, you fix bugs. And if you look at the other metrics that you talked about, they're going to trend negatively because things change.
They're all going to change together.
If you survey your customer, guess what? They're going to love what you did because you were agile and you responded to their change. And where that can go wrong, and some folks have studied over time, is then guess what? They want more of that chaos.
Right.
Well, and you have a tendency, the first time that happens, you might write good code. When you throw everything away that you've been working on and pull in new stuff, your code's probably going to be just as decent. The 10th time that happens in a 4-week period, you start to just, whatever. I'm just going to, people get really frustrated as developers and have a hard time moving forward without feeling like, I'm just going to throw this away anyway, so who cares? Because they don't know, when 90% is pulled out from under you, what's what's that last 10%? Why is it worth working so hard? Just throw it away.
Yeah, and that's where I think it's interesting because it was nice to get the validation that there is a significant value, and it's something that when we talk about metrics, we really don't talk about measuring customer satisfaction over time. We typically would do it maybe at the end of a project or at the end of a major release cycle where there's a natural kind of touch point.
We wait until they're gone,
or we wait until they're gone, and then
felt.
maybe it's too late. But what's unknown is if you adopt a proactive process of measuring your customers' expectations over time, just like we talk about developers from the inside gaming the metrics, would your customers game the metrics too?
Well, and what I would hope, I mean, that's possible, and I don't want to like stomp on that point because I think that's a good point. But what it's making me think is, I think the act of surveying the customer might have value outside of just the survey results, because if you're forcing them to think, am I satisfied or am I not? And if I'm not, why am I not? I think there's value there that they might then turn around and give you a call about something as they're thinking about the survey and say something to you that they would not have normally said if you had not presented the survey.
And to go full circle back to our first topic tonight, to be proactive instead of reactive and ensure that if there is an expectation management problem, it will only fester over time.
Right.
And so it's
right. And
it's an opportunity to draw that out.
This is one that I think we could talk about for 2 or 3 shows.
It's true.
I mean, it's completely a riddle wrapped in an enigma that developers who are data-driven people, who are rule-driven people, who like hard facts, for some reason aren't too keen on being measured is just puzzling to me. But we need to wrap it up for tonight, guys, and move on to our picks. So does anybody have any final parting words on... I'm
going to quit collecting metrics and just purchase a TARDIS so that I can go back and fix it.
Does anybody have any final parting thoughts on metrics before we move on to picks?
We talked about customers and collecting metrics about customers throughout instead of just at the end. I think that is just important for a company and the developers that work there, because if you can find out about their happiness and trends over time, and you get them to think about, hey, for the last couple of weeks, now that I'm thinking about it, it's going down, and here are the reasons why. You might get a little more feedback before it's gone down for 6 weeks, and then when they realize that it's been going down, they're like, I got to leave
for sure.
The other thing, it is a proactive strategy to put relevant information in front of the team to remind the whole team about what the goal is. So this is the customer that we're trying to please,
right? And
these are the customer's thoughts about what we're doing. And hence, in our earlier discussion, we talked about ensuring to promote the whole team approach and get everyone on the same page. And everyone needs to know what the goal is. And something I know I've observed, and I believe others probably have, is that over time, maybe we kick off a team and we throw our charter up on the wall and everyone knows what the goal is. And then, people are forgetful, people come, people go, and next thing you know, it's a few months down the road and there isn't a good shared understanding of what that goal is and what everyone should be working to achieve.
Yes.
Good conversation.
Yeah. We just got to remember both sides.
Yep, both sides.
You can't. It's hard to continue to please someone else when you're not happy yourself.
So, Amos, how's the state of our Agile union?
Ooh, what?
we don't have time for
State
of the Union address tonight.
Sorry, okay. We'll do that next time.
Yeah, you can give us a State
My
of the
pick is
Union.
the State of the Union
I
address.
don't even watch the State of the Union address. Especially not on a second-term president. It's like, wait, we just heard this 4 years ago.
I believe the word Agile is in the State of the Union address 2 times tonight from the prescript, if anyone wants to go listen to it.
Interesting.
Someone might be doing that after they get out here tonight.
Oh, I was thinking the inaugural speech. Never mind. The inaugural speech on a second-term president. I'm like, we just heard that 4 years ago. Just get in there and keep doing your job. Thank you.
You'll hear about sequestration a lot more.
Back to civics class for Amos.
All right.
Sorry.
Let's do our picks.
Yeah.
Nate, why don't you kick us off with your pick tonight?
Okay. I've got a pick that I was sent a while back that I just happened to look at today that I thought was pretty awesome. It is called TD Gotchi, and it is a Tamagotchi that is a plug-in for Eclipse, and it feeds on running tests, on good passing tests. So if your tests fail and then pass, that's how you feed it. So you need a fail and then a pass to feed it. And then if your tests fail twice, it starts to get sad. And if they fail too many times, then it will die. It'll become a zombie. So it's just a little fun plug-in thing that sits on the side, and you can feed him by by you can also refactor. You can refactor and also feed him too. So anyway, I thought that was funny.
That's pretty sweet. I had one of those when I was a kid. Actually, okay, so I was 16, but that's not the point.
You had a real Tamagotchi.
Oh yeah, I worked at Walmart. Whenever you work at Walmart, you see all kinds of stuff, and you're like, I'm a nerd. This thing's kind of programming, kind of. Let's see what we can make it do. And then you realize 3 days later that it's the most boring thing you've ever spent your money on.
It sounds like
Like a
Tamagotchi
Furby.
would be fun for a while, but he might get on my nerves after a while.
I know.
Just like Clippy.
Yeah, Clippy got on my nerves right away, though.
They showed you that you can put him on the little fast view, and he just sits over there, and he either makes a happy face or a sad face, and then you don't.
So if you are a
can ignore him if
developer,
you
the
want to.
parallel here is if you have a Ford car, it's the little EcoBoost green leaf that evaluates your driving techniques and how efficient you're being. If you're a more efficient driver, the leaf gets bigger. And if you're a very bad, inefficient driver who likes to floor it, the leaf just vanishes in the
So I
Earth
think you
will
should
die.
collect that metric.
That's a metric.
And you also should tie a heart rate monitor and a blood pressure monitor to yourself to find out if it has anything to do with how stressed out you are.
Oh, really?
Because I bet it does.
So I should put that on as I go home on the treadmill and I
tell
write
you-
emails late at night to people I work with.
I can tell you, I put more gas. I spend more money on gas the next morning after I've had a stressful day, and I drive home after a stressful day at work.
It's a good metric.
Anyway,
Because
that's
I
my
drive
pick.
faster.
Good pick, Nate. Jason.
I got some picks. So
I
I'm
see
first of
that.
all breaking the business rules. I'm plugging the St. Louis, Missouri Work in Progress Society, for which I'm actually going to help to organize our next meeting. Which for
It's limited work in
sorry,
progress.
thank you, Limited
important.
Work in Progress Society. I'm obviously
All
got some
the things
issues.
in progress.
So we're going to have not knowing when everyone will listen to our podcast, we're going to have a great discussion on the 18th of March, 2013, actually downtown St. Louis at the Asynchrony office, about a topic that will be decided using some of the features that we have on the Meetup group. So Google us, St. Louis Limited Whip Society. Thank you. We're on Meetup. Join our group, and we'll have a great discussion. The other thing I'm plugging this tonight is just Toastmasters, which has been a rather transformational experience for myself over the past year and a half, where some folks gave me some guidance that I needed to learn how to talk better. And so I went to Toastmasters, which is an open group. Some companies decide to do it internally, but there are open chapters all over America that you can go to, and actually all over the world. And it's a lot of fun, and you'll get better at talking if you want to do that.
Can I make a suggestion for your Limited Whip Society?
Sure.
Log in to Google Hangouts and make it an open hangout.
I will do that.
So that people who aren't here can get involved.
I will do that.
That'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah.
And we got all kinds of ideas
good
for
idea.
March, including I got a waste game that's based on Legos and all kinds of. We'll be fun.
Awesome.
Amos, are you ready with the pick?
I have a pick. I'm going to have to share the link with you. I actually pulled this up because what we were talking about tonight, it's Principles for Agile Metrics. It's by Jeff Langr.
Longer?
It's on developer.com. It's just a pretty good article that talks about measuring agility and some principles around measuring and what you should measure, what you shouldn't. And it's not about what metrics. It's more about is it hard to measure? You probably shouldn't. Don't measure 6 million things because you'll just get lost in a sea of metrics. And just a nice little article.
I think there's a song called Lost in the Sea of Metrics.
If there's not, there will be now.
Good pick, Amos. My pick is an article by Ron Jeffries. Just came out in the most recent edition of pragprog.com magazines, and it's called Estimation is Evil. It's quite a lengthy article, but it's a good read. And Ron talks about a lot of problems that you run into with doing estimates and speaks quite eloquently about the topic. So we'll have the link in the show notes, and highly recommend reading Estimation is Evil article by Ron Jeffries. So that is our picks for the evening, and that's our show for today. I'd like to thank a couple of special people who help with the show. Dr. Lee McCauley doing our audio engineering and post-production. Thank you, Lee. Whoop, whoop. Thank you to Rich Johnson and Dan Schwabe for music that we use in our intro and outro. And Adam Axe for the audio equipment that he provides to the show for our use. Of course, I'd also like to thank all of our co-hosts who are here tonight. Amos King, why don't you tell people a little bit more about yourself and where we can maybe find out more about you.
You can find me on Twitter at ADKRON. And John, just for you, my still crappy looking blog at dirtyinformation.com. And my GitHub is also ADKRON. That's about it.
Cool. Nate Mackey, thanks for joining the show tonight. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, I have a Twitter account, Nate Mackey, NateMckie. And you can also find more about me on asynchrony.com, asynchrony.com. Little bio there, and that's where I work.
Cool, thanks. Jason Tice, thanks for joining.
Sporadically on Twitter at Tice Thoughts. Or, guess what? Come to the St. Louis Limited Whip Society on the 18th of March, and guess what? Enjoy the live show.
Yeah. You guys
One
can
night only.
Tice Live!
Sunday.
No, it's more like Monday.
Sorry, Monday. Okay. You can experience what we get to have fun with every podcast when Jason is around.
That's right.
The fun that is Jason Tice. Thank you, Jason.
I'll bring Legos.
Big Jason.
Big Jason.
Big enterprise. And I'm John Sextro. Amos, did you have something you wanted to say before?
I just wanted to say that Lee's real name is Thomas. Yes! Called you out.
Where can we find you, John?
Thanks, Nate. You guys can find me at my website, johnsextro.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at jcsextro. That's it, guys. Thanks for listening. Be sure to check out our website at thisagilelife.com to find the show notes for this podcast. And keep living this agile life.
I almost did that too.
I waited long enough.
No, I better not.
I gave it a little pause.